Most people believe that strength is an external force measured by the violence of your reaction. Rui discovered that everything changes the moment you drop the weapon of your emotions and choose absolute emptiness instead. What happened next rewrote everything he thought he knew about what it truly means to be dangerous. There is a hidden venom circulating inside your veins right now. It is not an external poison, but something far more intimate, far more familiar. It is the silent fury that lights up your chest when a rival insults your honor, the burning fire that tears through your stomach when life refuses to match your expectations. It is the raw, untamed ego that breaks your focus, shatters your relationships, and leaves you exposed to your enemies. You continue to feed this monster every single day, believing it gives you an edge. But the ancient masters understood a secret that modern men have completely forgotten. The most terrifying warrior on the battlefield is not the one screaming for blood, but the one whose eyes remain entirely cold, still, and unmoved while the world burns around him. Miyamoto Musashi fought 60 deadly encounters and never felt his foot slip. Not because his arms were the strongest, but because his mind was completely empty of fury. This is the tale of how a broken warrior slaughtered his own inner demon to become an immovable force, and how you can apply his forgotten philosophy to destroy your own emotional triggers forever. The ultimate question is not whether the flames of life will burn you, but whether you will allow them to consume your mind, or turn your focus into cold, hardened iron. The tatami mats felt ice cold beneath Rui's trembling knees, but the sweat pouring from his forehead was scalding hot. His knuckles were raw, split open from gripping the wooden training sword too tightly, his teeth grinding together so hard his jaw throbbed with a dull, sickening ache. He had fallen into the dirt again. This was the third time in a single morning that his weapon had been knocked clean from his hands during sparring, and each time, the exact same curse had brought his ruin. The instant his opponent's wooden blade clipped his shoulder, a blind fog of red rolled over Rui's vision. His form disintegrated. His months of dedicated footwork vanished. He became nothing more than a wild animal, swinging his sword with desperate, chaotic violence, trying only to inflict pain, trying to punish the hand that dared strike him. And because he swung with blind rage, he was incredibly easy to defeat. He was 22 years old, physically peak, lightning fast with his reflexes, yet he was completely enslaved by his own internal impulses. Ren stood over the fallen student, his posture perfectly upright, his hands tucked loosely into the wide sleeves of his dark indigo robes. The old master's eyes did not hold anger nor pity. They held only a deep, terrifying clarity that seemed to see through Rui's flesh directly into his fractured spirit. "Get back up," Ren commanded, his voice flat, cutting through the heavy air of the wooden hall. Rui pushed himself up, wiping blood from his lip, his chest heaving like a winded stallion. "My opponent got lucky," Rui spat, his voice shaking with humiliation. The master didn't blink. "A lie," Ren replied softly. "Speak truth, or pack your things and leave this mountain forever." The sheer weight of the master's voice dissolved the immediate fog in Rui's head. He looked down at his bleeding hands, forcing the bitter words past his teeth. "I lost my mind. I got angry." Ren nodded slowly, stepping toward the center of the hall. "Exactly. And the moment you became furious, you became completely weak. You believe your rage is an unbridled weapon, Rui, but it is actually a heavy iron leash. It makes your actions entirely predictable. It tells your enemy exactly where to strike before you even lift your hands." The master turned and pointed his long finger toward a heavy wooden scroll hanging at the front of the dojo. Upon it was painted a single, bold kanji symbol, Fudoshin. The immovable mind. This is the missing piece in your armor, Ren explained. The greatest warriors to ever walk these islands did not survive because they were untouchable, but because their spirits were entirely unprovoked by chaos. Until you master this stillness, you will continue to lose every single battle you fight, not just within these walls, but out in the cruel world. Rui stared at the ancient ink, his spirit sinking into a dark place. He had heard the philosophers speak of this legendary calm, the idea that a true warrior must remain as still as a mountain, regardless of the arrows raining down upon him. But he had never understood the practical path to it. How do you simply stop the fire from burning when someone deliberately pushes you into the flames? How do you remain silent when an enemy actively spits on your name? I do not know how to kill the fire, Rui admitted, his shoulders dropping in absolute defeat. Ren looked down at him, and for the first time in many moons, a faint, knowing smile touched the corners of his mouth. Good, the master murmured. Acknowledging your own ignorance is the opening of the gate. Come with me. I will show you the exact discipline that turned the most dangerous swordsman in history into an absolute phantom on the battlefield. Ren led the young apprentice out of the wide training hall, down a narrow stone pathway lined with moss-covered lanterns, into a small, shadowed chamber dedicated entirely to internal reflection. The room contained nothing but two simple woven cushions and the faint, sweet scent of burning cedar. They sat opposite each other, their legs crossed, the silence between them growing so heavy that the distant drop of water from a bamboo pipe outside sounded like a hammer striking an anvil. Let us speak clearly of Miyamoto Musashi, Ren began, his voice dropping into a low, hypnotic rhythm. The common people tell grand legends of his dual blades, his impossible speed, his unmatched physical endurance. They are looking at the reflection in the water, completely missing the moon above. Musashi did not survive 60 life or death duels because his arms were faster than other men. He survived because he was entirely dead to his own emotions when the steel was drawn. While his rivals screamed to summon their courage, while their hearts pounded with the terror of the void or the white-hot fury of pride, Musashi remained as cold and calculating as winter itself. Rui leaned forward, his hands resting flat on his thighs. But how is such a state humanly possible, Master? When the steel is inches from your throat, how do you prevent the blood from boiling? The answer traveled across the vast oceans long ago, Ren replied, pulling a worn piece of parchment from his robe. A great warrior emperor from a distant land across the salt seas wrote words that Musashi would have carved into his own armor. He said, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your own estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment." Let those words sink deep into your bones. Rui, when a man insults your lineage or slaps your face, he has merely made a sound or a gesture. He has no physical power to alter your spirit. The only reason you burn with anger is because your own mind has judged his action as a threat to your pride. If someone can make you furious with a single sentence, they own you entirely. You are not a free warrior, you are a helpless wooden puppet, and they are pulling your strings with absolute ease. The realization hit Rui with the force of an unexpected blow to the solar plexus. He looked back across his short, turbulent life. Every barroom brawl, every hostile confrontation on the road, every bitter argument with his peers, he had reacted exactly like a mechanical trap springing open. He had given his power away to anyone who wished to take it. Musashi cut those strings with his own mind. Ren continued, his eyes locking onto Rui's with an intense, burning focus. He trained himself to become completely immune to provocation. It did not matter if his enemies mocked his ragged clothing. It did not matter if they arrived hours late to make him wait in the blistering sun. And it did not matter if they brought a dozen men to ambush him in the dark. He remained entirely still within his own chest, watching their movements, calculating their errors, waiting for the single inch of exposure that would end their lives. But that was only the very surface of the problem. What Rui found next made this first lesson feel completely incomplete. The true secret of the sword does not lie in how hard your blade can strike, but in how impossible your spirit is to disturb, Ren said, his voice echoing off the bare wooden walls of the small chamber. A man who possesses no emotional triggers is an absolute ghost to his enemies. You cannot threaten him, because he does not cling to his skin. You cannot manipulate him through pride, because he has already dropped his name into the dirt. That is true power. The master stood up slowly, pacing the length of the small room, his gaze drifting toward the small paper window that looked out over the misty mountain peaks. You must understand, Rui, that this journey you are embarking upon is not uniquely yours. Throughout the long, bloody history of this world, every true master of the martial way has had to face this exact same internal monster. The red mist of fury is a universal plague that rots a man from the inside out, making him brittle precisely when he needs to be flexible, making him foolish when he needs to be wise. In ages you cannot fathom, in lands far across the horizons, men will still be fighting this exact same silent war within their own chests. They will be consumed by the chaos of their daily lives, driven mad by disrespect, ruined by their own inability to sit still in the face of an insult. And they will have to learn the exact same truth you are learning now, that executing your own anger is the very first step to becoming truly dangerous to your adversaries. Not dangerous because you are a violent beast, but dangerous because you are completely unshakable. Ren stopped his pacing, turning back to face the young apprentice, placing a heavy, warm hand firmly upon Rui's shoulder. If you feel a calling to this severe discipline, if you recognize that the demon of fury is currently steering your life toward ruin, know that you do not walk this path in isolation. You are joining a long, silent lineage of shadows who have chosen internal order over external chaos. This is what we forge here within these walls, the ancient psychology of the warrior, stripped of modern vanity, applied directly to the human soul. We teach men how to become a mountain. Ren's gaze seemed to pierce straight through Rui's eyes, looking down into the deep, quiet spaces of his mind. If you wish to survive the coming storms, you must commit your entire existence to this training. Do not treat these words as mere philosophy to be debated over evening tea. Treat them as a survival code. The whole of the immovable spirit is always standing open, but it demands everything you have. The men who complete this training become entirely unstoppable, not because they conquer others, but because they have conquered their own blood. Rui bowed his head low, feeling a profound shift occur within his chest. He did not fully comprehend the vast scale of the master's words, nor why they felt as though they were echoing down through centuries of time, but he felt an iron commitment solidify within his heart. He was no longer just a boy trying to win a simple wooden sword match. He was a seeker trying to save himself from his own internal self-destruction. Ren stepped back, his tone returning to its familiar, sharp clarity. Good, the romantic illusions are gone. Now, let us begin the actual work of executing your demon. The first step toward absolute stillness, Ren explained the following dawn as they stood at the edge of a rocky cliff, is to look directly into the mirror of your own vanity. Tell me without deceit, Rui, why does it tear through your chest when another student lands a blow upon your flesh? Rui looked down at the swirling mountain mists below, searching his own thoughts. Because I have trained for years, Master, I have given everything to the blade. I deserve to be respected within the walls of the dojo. Ren let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded like dry bamboo splitting. There it is, the master whispered, his eyes narrowing. Entitlement, the mother of all human fury. You believe the world owes you an accurate reflection of your own high opinion of yourself. You believe that other men should bow to your timeline, that the weather should match your comfort, that life should be an inherently fair game. Musashi looked upon such thinking with absolute disgust. He wrote that a true warrior must remain entirely detached from expectation. He walked through the wilderness alone, slept in the freezing mud without a blanket, and kept his spirit completely naked of luxury. He expected absolutely nothing from the heavens or from his fellow men. And because he expected nothing, it was physically impossible for the world to disappoint him. Because he claimed no status, there was no ego for his enemies to insult. Over the next 3 moons, Ren placed the young apprentice into a severe crucible that he called the training of the void, a systematic destruction of every emotional trigger Rui possessed. The first week was dedicated entirely to the discipline of voluntary hardship. Rui was banned from sleeping inside the wooden dormitories. He was forced to spend 7 consecutive nights on the jagged stones of the outdoor courtyard, wrapped in nothing but a thin, threadbare summer robe while the mountain frost settled on his eyelashes. His meals were restricted to a single bowl of cold, unseasoned rice each sunset, and his physical labor was doubled. His muscles screamed with agony. His mind screamed 1,000 articulate justifications for throwing down his wooden sword and fleeing back to the comfort of the lower villages. But on the 4th night, as he sat shivering in the dark, watching his own breath form clouds in the freezing air, a strange clarity washed over him. He realized that nearly every ounce of his daily frustration was simply his ego throwing a tantrum, because his skin was cold and his belly was empty. By stepping into discomfort on his own terms, he was starving his own entitlement at the root. The secondary phase of the crucible was far more agonizing, the discipline of absolute non-reaction. Ren gathered the entire dojo into a tight circle around Rui. For hours at a time, the other students were commanded to use every insult, every piece of mockery, and every psychological barb they could devise to break Rui's composure. They laughed at his clumsy form, they spat near his feet, they insulted the memory of his ancestors, and they ridiculed his poverty. Your only duty, Ren instructed, is to remain perfectly still. You will not lift a finger to defend your name, you will not offer a single word of explanation, and you will not allow your eyes to narrow. You will simply watch them. You will treat their words like the wind blowing through the pine trees. On the first afternoon, Rui lasted less than 20 breaths before his chest swelled with fury and he stepped forward to strike a mocking student. He was immediately ordered to his knees and forced to begin again. But as the days bled into one another, something miraculous began to happen within his awareness. He noticed that when a man hurls an insult, he is desperately seeking a reaction. He is throwing out a hook, hoping you will bite it so he can drag you into his own chaos. When you meet his venom with absolute, dead silence, the entire power dynamic flips in an instant. The attacker loses his leverage. He expects defensiveness, anger, or fear. When you give him nothing but a calm, steady gaze, he becomes entirely confused, insecure, and hollow. By the 7th day, Rui stood completely motionless, while the most vicious words in the language were shouted inches from his face. He heard the sounds clearly, but he chose not to let them cross the threshold of his spirit. The final week of the void training brought the most profound discipline of all, the daily meditation on personal mortality. Every morning before the sun broke over the eastern ridges, Rui was ordered to sit on the edge of the cliff and vividly visualize his own death. He had to imagine his body pierced by a battlefield spear, his flesh turning cold, his eyes staring blankly at the sky, his life entirely ended, and his name forgotten by history. "Why must I dwell on such darkness, Master?" Rui asked, his voice low. "Because a man who has already accepted his own absolute destruction cannot be rattled by minor inconveniences," Ren answered. Musashi wrote clearly in his final texts, "Think lightly of yourself and deeply of the world. When death is your constant shadow, the petty dramas of the daily life lose their grip upon your soul. What is a rude gesture from a passerby when you are already a corpse? What is a lost match compared to the endless void of time?" Rui practiced this dark visualization every single dawn. At first it filled his stomach with a cold, greasy terror. He did not want to imagine his breath leaving him. But after weeks of staring directly into the face of his own passing, the terror sublimated into a strange, beautiful peace. Death stopped being a monster hiding in the dark. It became a natural, inevitable boundary that made everything else beautifully small. The insults of his peers, the sting of a training blow, the anxiety of failure, all of it was revealed to be nothing more than dust blowing across a graveyard. At the end of the 3 moons, Ren ordered Rui to face the exact same senior student who had humiliated him at the beginning of his training. The match began under a blazing noon sun. The senior student moved aggressively, his wooden sword flashing through the air, landing a heavy, painful strike directly across Rui's ribs. In the old days, that pain would have ignited a volcanic eruption of fury within Rui's chest. But now, he simply felt the physical sensation rise, acknowledged it as mere data, and chose not to obey the impulse to lash out. His mind remained entirely clear, like a deep mountain lake. His footwork stayed light and fluid. He watched his opponent's eyes, noting the exact moment the senior student grew frustrated by Rui's total lack of emotion. The senior student overcommitted, swinging wildly to force a reaction. Rui stepped inside the arc of the blow with effortless grace, his wooden blade stopping a mere fraction of an inch from his opponent's exposed throat. The match was over in less than 2 minutes. Rui lowered his weapon and bowed deeply, his breath steady, his heart rate completely calm. That evening, as the stars broke across the mountain sky, Ren gathered all the disciples around the central hearth for a formal lesson in warrior psychology. Tonight, the master announced, his eyes catching the orange glow of the embers, "We will dismantle the inner machinery of the blade. We will examine exactly why anger degrades your capability, and why emotional stillness makes you absolutely lethal to your enemies. Consider the natural mechanics of human fear and fury. Your mind is split into 2 distinct forces, the ancient, primitive beast that lives at the base of your skull, and the refined strategist that sits behind your forehead. The primitive beast knows only 3 things: to flee, to freeze, or to tear things apart with blind rage. When you allow an external provocation to make you angry, that primitive beast takes absolute control of your body. It starves the strategist of blood. Your peripheral vision narrows until you are functionally blind to your surroundings. Your ability to anticipate an enemy's movement vanishes. You become nothing more than a predictable machine swinging a heavy piece of steel. This is precisely why Musashi won his encounters against men of superior physical stature. While his opponents allowed their primitive minds to scream with fury, Musashi kept his inner strategist firmly on the throne. He saw openings they were too blind to notice. He made tactical adjustments they were too panicked to conceive. He overrode the animal reflex with absolute conscious intention. The ancient Stoics of the Western world understood this exact same architecture. Ren continued, throwing a fresh log onto the fire. They taught that an event and your emotional reaction are two completely separate things, divided by a small canyon of choice. A man yells an insult, that is merely an event in the physical world. Your chest tightening with rage, that is your personal choice to accept his poison. You have the absolute power to choose a different path. Real internal discipline is not about controlling the actions of your enemies. It is about maintaining absolute sovereignty over your own internal kingdom, regardless of what those enemies do. Musashi wrote in his Book of 5 Rings, "Do nothing which is of no use." And there is nothing more entirely useless than an uncontrolled emotion. You believe your rage shows the world how strong you are, but it actually reveals your profound fragility. It tells everyone around you that your internal peace is so weak, it can be shattered by a single word from a stranger. Your mind must become like a perfectly polished blade. If you allow it to rust with the moisture of emotion, it dulls and shatters upon impact. But when it remains perfectly cold, dry, and silent, it cuts through the thickest armor without a single nick. At its very core, Ren whispered, his voice falling into an intense, quiet register that made every student lean closer to the fire. Anger is nothing more than your ego wearing a warrior's mask. You do not get furious because the world is inherently wicked. You get furious because the precious image you have built of yourself is being threatened. Someone challenges your authority. Someone calls you incompetent. Someone treats you as if you are invisible, and your ego panics. It demands that you fight to prove your importance. But Musashi understood that the ego is an illusion that makes a man fragile. The more recognition you crave from the world, the easier it is for your enemies to lead you by the nose. Musashi's ultimate solution was to completely execute his own vanity. He did not care if the courts praised his name. He did not care if he looked like a beggar on the high roads. And he did not care if his history was forgotten. He had absolutely nothing to prove to anyone. And because he had nothing to prove, there was no target for an enemy to hit. If you slaughter your own vanity, your anger dies from starvation. 3 years of continuous, grueling training passed over the mountain dojo, and Rui's name began to be whispered in the valleys below. He had become a completely different creature. His movements were silent, his eyes were clear, and his presence was as steady as an ancient oak. Then, the universe decided to test his alignment with absolute, unforgiving brutality. A messenger arrived at the dojo gates mid-morning, his horse lathered in foam, bearing dark news from Rui's ancestral village. His younger brother Mira, the only family Rui had left in this world, had been killed. A band of lawless outlaws had swept through the valley, demanding tribute. Mira had stood his ground to protect the village grain, and they had beaten him to death in the open square, leaving his broken body in the dirt before riding away into the northern forests. The moment the words left the messenger's mouth, a sound like a rushing river filled Rui's ears. A familiar, long-forgotten monster roared back to life deep within his belly. a volcanic surge of white-hot, primitive fury that threatened to completely burn through his 3 years of mental discipline. His vision narrowed to a sharp point. His hands shook with an uncontrollable urge to grip a real sword and spill blood. He marched directly into Ren's private quarters, his voice raspy, choked with a dark, desperate venom. "Master, I am leaving. I am going north to slaughter every single man who laid a hand on my brother." Ren looked up from his scroll, his face an unreadable mask of stone. "No," the master said flatly. "You will stay here." "They murdered my blood," Rui roared, his hands clenching into fists that drew blood from his own palms. "They took an innocent life. I must have vengeance." Ren stood up slowly, stepping directly into Rui's path, his eyes locking onto the young warrior with an immense, unyielding gravity. "This is your true crucible, Rui, not the simple matches with wooden swords, not the petty insults of your fellow disciples. This is real loss. This is genuine tragedy. This is a completely justified fury. If you pack your steel and run north right now, driven by this red fog, you will either die against their spears, or you will become the exact same lawless beast you claim to hate. The inner demon will have won his final victory over your spirit. Everything we have forged here will have been nothing but an expensive lie. Am I to sit here like a coward while my brother's killers walk free?" Rui demanded, tears of pure rage finally breaking down his cheeks. "I did not tell you to be a coward," Ren answered softly, his voice full of an ancient, paternal warmth. "I told you not to act from fury. Fudoshin is not the absence of grief, Rui. It is the conscious choice to not allow that grief to steer your weapon. If you go north as a slave to your rage, your strikes will be sloppy, your strategy will be blind, and you will join your brother in the earth. For 7 days, you will not touch a weapon. You will sit in absolute silence in the meditation hall. You will feel every ounce of this agony. You will let the fire burn your spirit until there is nothing left but ash. And then, when the 7 days are complete, if your clear mind still decides that justice requires steel, you will march north as a cold judge, not a frantic beast." That week was a descent into an absolute living hell for Rui. He sat cross-legged on the woven cushion for 18 hours a day, while waves of intense grief, hatred, and violent fantasies crashed over his mind. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to strike, to do something to drown out the pain of his loss. But he forced his flesh to remain stationary. He watched the anger rise like a massive dark tidal wave. He breathed through it. He observed how his mind tried to spin endless stories of bloody retribution. And slowly, day by day, the white-hot heat of the fury began to cool into something else. Something solid, heavy, and completely clear. By the morning of the 8th day, the red fog had entirely vanished. He looked out over the courtyard and realized an unshakable truth. Killing the outlaws would not breathe life back into Mira's lungs. If he allowed hatred to consume his existence, he would be handing his brother's killers the ultimate victory. They would have destroyed both of their lives. He walked into Ren's quarters, bowed low, and placed his training sword flat upon the floor. "I will not go north," Rui said, his voice entirely steady, clear, and quiet. "Why?" Ren asked, his eyes gleaming with a profound satisfaction. "Because I refuse to let them dictate who I am," Rui replied. "My brother died with honor. If I allow their darkness to turn me into a monster of revenge, the demon wins. I choose to remain a master of myself." Ren nodded slowly, bowing back to his student. You have passed the final gate, my son. That is true Fudoshin. You have felt the greatest fire life can throw at a man, and you have chosen to remain completely immovable. 4 seasons later, Rui sat at the front of the grand training hall, his dark robes pooling around his crossed legs. He was no longer the desperate student, he was the primary instructor of the lineage. Kneeling before him was a young, hot-headed apprentice who had just arrived from the coastal provinces, quick to anger, his eyes constantly darting with pride, his jaw tight with the exact same fury that had once ruled Rui's youth. Master Rui, the young boy asked, his voice full of frustrated ambition, the villagers say you are an untouchable force because you feel no emotion. How did you kill your feelings? Rui smiled faintly, looking down at his own palms, which bore the silver scars of his long journey. The villagers are entirely wrong, the master answered gently. I feel the fire of anger rise within my chest just as frequently as you do. The only difference between us is that I have learned to recognize it as an illusion, and I have chosen to never obey its commands. The young apprentice looked deeply skeptical, his hand twitching near the hilt of his wooden practice blade. But does not fury give a warrior an edge? Does it not make you hit with more explosive power? No, Rui replied, his voice dropping into that familiar, unyielding iron rhythm that Ren had used years ago. It makes you fight like a fool. It degrades your technique, destroys your awareness, and makes your movements completely predictable to a cold enemy. Anger feels like a massive wave of strength, but it is actually the exact moment control is stolen away from your spirit. You get furious because you still believe you are entitled to rule the world around you. You believe people should treat you with deference, that your plans should never fail, that life should conform to your tiny ego. Musashi stripped himself of all such vanity. He expected absolutely nothing from this world, and therefore, he was entirely impossible to provoke. If you possess no triggers, your enemy has nothing to manipulate. The quietest warrior in the room is always the most lethal, because his mind is a perfect mirror, reflecting reality exactly as it is, unclouded by the smoke of internal fury. Rui stood up slowly, leading the young boy out toward the wide training fields, where dozens of new students were moving through their forms in perfect unison. Look upon them, Rui said, gesturing to the field. Every soul arrived here, consumed by their own internal reactions, weak because they believed their temper was a shield. They are learning what the masters have always known. True strength is not the ability to strike down another man, it is the absolute sovereignty over your own spirit. This ancient code is not dead history written on old scrolls. It is a living, breathing practice that is required more desperately today than ever before. If you feel the red mist of reaction controlling your daily life, if you recognize that your own triggers are making you weak, then you must commit yourself entirely to this discipline. Train your mind to see an insult as nothing more than empty wind. Drop your vanity into the dirt. Walk the path of absolute internal alignment and become completely immovable. Rui placed his hand firmly on the young boy's shoulder, his eyes reflecting the deep calm of the mountain peaks. You do not walk this path alone. Every master who ever cut his own puppet strings walks beside you. Take up your practice weapon, stand your ground, and remember, the warrior who cannot be provoked is the warrior who can never be defeated.